The league can pretend this is just about discipline and precedent, but everyone watching knows this has turned into something far bigger, far messier, and far more uncomfortable for the NFL than a single shove near the front row. Because the moment DK Metcalf put his hands on that fan, the ripple effects didn't stop at his own sideline, didn't stop with the Steelers, and didn't stop with a 2-game suspension that may or may not be reduced. Because now this chaos is bleeding directly into a postseason race that is already hanging by a thread, and suddenly Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, and the entire AFC North are being dragged into a conversation they didn't ask for but can't escape. This is what happens when one emotional decision collides with an unforgiving league calendar, because now every snap, every injury update, every suspension appeal feels magnified, and the margin for error is gone. The controversy isn't just whether the NFL went too far or not far enough with Metcalf. It's whether the league has once again created a situation where consistency feels optional and accountability feels selective. And when that happens, the fallout always lands hardest on the teams and players already living on the edge. People want to argue about fan behavior, about provocation, about history between a player and someone in the stands. But none of that erases the reality that DK Metcalf walked away from his bench, walked into a situation that never should have escalated, and handed the league an excuse to make an example out of him at the worst possible time. And now, because this suspension overlaps with games that directly impact playoff seeding and survival, the conversation has exploded beyond Metcalf himself and landed squarely on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, a team that doesn't have the luxury of chaos right now. This isn't theoretical anymore. This isn't debate show noise. This is real pressure, real consequences, and real careers being judged in real time. Because when the NFL tightens its grip, it doesn't ask who's already injured, who's already struggling, or who's already staring down elimination. It just squeezes, and everyone else has to deal with the damage. What started as one moment of lost composure has now become a symbol of how thin the line is between control and collapse in this league, and why the stakes feel so suffocating for everyone involved. Here's what actually happened, stripped of the noise and boiled down to why this has become such a flashpoint right now. DK Metcalf was suspended without pay following an altercation with a fan during Sunday's game in Detroit. A moment caught on video showing Metcalf shoving a fan who was leaning over the railing in the first row. There was no in-game discipline, but the league stepped in afterward, handing down a 2-game suspension that immediately sparked backlash, debate, and speculation. Metcalf plans to appeal, with a hearing expected imminently, and if the suspension stands, the financial implications are massive, including forfeited game checks and the potential risk to future guaranteed money, even if the team ultimately has discretion over whether that clause is enforced. The Steelers are now staring at the possibility of finishing the regular season without a clear number 1 receiver. And at the same time, the AFC North playoff picture is tightening, with Baltimore's margin for error essentially gone after Lamar Jackson left their Week 16 loss with a back injury. This is why this story has detonated across the league, because it's no longer isolated to one incident or one team. It's intersecting directly with postseason survival, quarterback health, and organizational accountability. If you want more breakdowns like this and you don't want to miss how these stories evolve as the pressure ramps up, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that like button, because this situation is far from over. The most revealing part of this entire debate isn't the shove itself, it's how quickly the conversation shifted from what happened to what it means, and that's where the comments from the panel cut deeper than people realize. When you hear the argument that the suspension isn't too harsh, it's rooted in one unavoidable truth that keeps getting repeated for a reason. DK Metcalf left the bench area. That single decision is the pivot point of everything that followed. Players sit on the sideline for a reason. They're separated from the stands for a reason. And the moment you cross that invisible boundary, the league's tolerance evaporates. The video doesn't show a fan throwing something, doesn't show physical contact initiated from the stands, doesn't show a player defending himself in the heat of play. It shows Metcalf walking over and making contact, and that distinction matters more to the NFL than intent, history, or frustration. The league doesn't want gray areas here because gray areas invite chaos, and chaos is the one thing the NFL works relentlessly to eliminate when it comes to player-fan interactions. That's why the idea of setting a precedent keeps coming up, because the league is signaling that even if a fan is antagonizing, even if there's history, even if emotions are running high, the responsibility stays with the player to disengage. And when you hear the argument that the 2-game suspension gives the league room to negotiate on appeal, that's not just procedural talk, that's strategy. It allows the NFL to look firm without being inflexible, to potentially reduce the punishment while still reinforcing the message that this behavior crosses a line. But even those who think the suspension might get knocked down to 1 game aren't defending Metcalf's actions. They're acknowledging that once he walked over, he put himself in a position where the league almost had no choice but to respond forcefully. What complicates this further is the financial side, because now you're not just talking about missed games, you're talking about millions of dollars theoretically hanging in the balance. That's why the reaction to the potential voiding of future guarantees feels so visceral, because it raises the question of proportionality. At what point does punishment stop being corrective and start being excessive? That tension is exactly why this debate feels so raw, because while fan behavior is being called out as clownish and unacceptable, there's also an acknowledgement that the consequences for Metcalf could spiral far beyond the initial incident. And yet, the consistent refrain remains the same: don't leave the bench, don't engage, don't put your hands on a fan, because the league will always side with containment over context. As this unfolds, the timing couldn't be worse for teams in the AFC North, especially Baltimore. The conversation pivoted sharply when Lamar Jackson's injury entered the picture, because now the league's discipline philosophy and the Ravens' playoff hopes are colliding in a way that feels cruelly synchronized. Lamar went down with a back injury in the second quarter against New England, was ruled out, and Baltimore proceeded to blow a significant fourth-quarter lead at home. That loss didn't just hurt, it mathematically cornered them. Their only path now is to win the division, a path that requires perfection from them and failure from Pittsburgh, with the 2 teams set to meet in the final week. That's not just difficult, it's suffocating. The debate over whether Lamar deserves a pass if the Ravens miss the postseason exposes a deeper philosophical divide about accountability in the NFL. On one side, there's the argument that injuries matter, that missing multiple games, playing banged up, and dealing with circumstances beyond your control should factor into how performance is evaluated. On the other side, there's the cold, unforgiving reality that this league doesn't hand out excuses, it hands out results. The pushback is fierce because Lamar isn't just any quarterback, he's a 2-time MVP, and expectations follow accolades. When someone with that resume misses games and the team fails to capitalize when opportunities arise, patience wears thin fast. What makes this especially contentious is that even when Lamar was healthy enough to play, the Ravens didn't always deliver. They had leads they couldn't protect, chances they couldn't convert, and moments that slipped away. The argument that they lost games they should have won, even with Lamar involved, undermines the idea that injury alone explains everything. That's why the tone gets heated when passes are mentioned, because in the NFL, passes feel like luxury items reserved for no one. The counter-argument is ruthless. You had the roster, you had the opportunity, and you didn't finish. That's not bad luck. That's failure to execute. And yet, the frustration cuts both ways, because football isn't played in a vacuum. Missed calls, overturned touchdowns, and critical moments that hinge on interpretation all factor into how seasons unravel. When a catch is ruled incomplete, when a play goes the other way, those moments accumulate, and by December, they define narratives. But the league doesn't rewind seasons for what-ifs. It tallies wins and losses and moves on. That's why the idea of giving Lamar a pass feels so polarizing, because it challenges the league's most basic principle, that availability and results matter as much as talent. As the debate spirals, blame inevitably spreads, and that's when coaching enters the crosshairs. If you can't pin it all on the quarterback, if injuries only explain so much, then leadership becomes the next target. Questions about defensive collapses, blown leads, and long-term trends under the same head coach surface, because sustained disappointment demands accountability somewhere. When a team repeatedly finds itself on the wrong side of late-game outcomes, narratives harden, and patience evaporates. This is why the Metcalf suspension, Lamar's injury, and the Ravens' playoff desperation feel connected, even if they aren't directly linked on the field. They all expose how fragile control is in the NFL. One emotional reaction, one awkward injury, one blown lead, and suddenly everything unravels. The league wants to project order, precedent, and consistency, but the reality is messier. Players are human, fans push boundaries, injuries don't care about standings, and seasons hinge on moments that feel unfair in hindsight. What makes this moment so compelling is that it forces uncomfortable questions without offering clean answers. Did the NFL go too far with Metcalf, or did it do exactly what it always promised it would do? Does Lamar deserve empathy for a season derailed by injuries, or does his status demand harsher judgment? Should teams absorb chaos as part of the game, or should leadership changes follow repeated collapses? None of these questions exist in isolation, and that's why the debate feels endless. As the appeal looms, as injury reports roll in, and as the AFC North inches toward its final verdict, the tension isn't going anywhere. The league will continue to emphasize precedent, players will continue to test emotional limits, and fans will continue to insert themselves into moments they don't belong in. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, careers, contracts, and legacies hang in the balance, shaped not just by talent, but by restraint, timing, and the brutal reality that in the NFL, there is no pause button when everything starts to fall apart.